September 7th, 2021. And item 3B, approval to prepay claims. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated. So moved. A motion from Councilmember Loweye. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Ball. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Moving on, item number 4, open forum. Do have a statement that we have a written comment that has been submitted for open forum. It will be put into the public record and included in tomorrow's packet. So that has been submitted to us by a constituent. Is there anybody else here who wishes to address the council in open forum at this time? Okay, please come forward, state your name, your address, and what it is that you wish to address the council about.
Steve Jensen, 29668 Shoreview Lane, Unit 905. The question I have for the council is last March and late September, I asked a question that I had asked at the last public hearing in forum about.
Mr. Jensen, may I stop you? Is this in regards to short-term rentals?
It is in regards to the city attorney. The question isn't to do with the rentals. The question is legal opinions from the city attorney. I've gotten 2 different answers from the city, so I understand, Mr. Mayor, 100%. So the first answer I got at the end of March was legal opinions from the city attorney are not public information, so it's our discretion if we share. Okay, fair enough. Then May 28th, I believe, I got the answer that the city attorney is the city council's attorney. Conversations and discussions between an attorney and client are confidential. So my question is, which answer is correct? Because they're 2 totally different answers. And then what ordinance or statute pertains to the correct answer? And that's yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address the council in open forum? Seeing none, open forum is now closed. Moving on, item 5 in the agenda, mayor and city council reports and committee reports. 5A, mayor. I'd like to have the city administrator give us a brief update on the fire department status. And basically, where we're at right now, just so everybody is aware, is that we currently are contracted with the city of Pequot Lakes for our fire services. We are currently looking and talking with other communities right now. We have met with Cross Lake in Ideal Township and discussed with them potential fire services. And we will be meeting with the city of Nisswa as well as with Mission Township as well. In addition, we have had some continued conversations with the city of Pequot Lakes with regards to providing future fire services as well. So a lot of information going back and forth, but we're looking at all different options right now with regards to our fire services and determining what it is that we want to do moving forward. So that's just a real brief update on it with regards to what we have happening, and we'll continue to keep the council apprised as we go. We did get our recent report from the Pequot Lakes Fire Department for September 2021, and we had 6 total calls, actually 1, take that back, 1 total call for us, and it was, and then in August, we also had 4 calls there. So again, our call service continues to be quite low here in the city of Breezy Point, which is always a good thing to see. So the one other thing I do want to share before I move off to the other council members' reports is I would like to ask the council to consider for our November meeting having a but in light of some of the other large projects that I know that we're gonna be undertaking, I thought I'd like to see the council.
We're gonna switch you out, even though we tested it today and it worked. Right, Joe? We're gonna switch this out because it's not picking you up.
Okay.
So just turn that one off and put this one on. This is just a little bell, so if you hook it to your shirt.
Got it. Is it picking me up now?
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like it. Okay. So anyway, back to what I was asking, if the council is open to putting that on the agenda for next month to have a little further discussion about that expansion. So don't know if anybody has any comments on that, but I'm just hoping we could have further discussion on that. So that's something we'll be looking at and for next month. Other than that, moving on. So item 5B, city council members. 5BI, road committee. Councilmember Maroney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the road committee did meet on Wednesday, September 8th. And again, this is in regards to the Bushman Road with Ackerson or Wild Acres and Nelson Road, the cooperative project between the four communities. The city of Breezy Point is, obviously, the Bushman Road is all in our jurisdiction. This is, again, is in regards to upgrading that roadway. Further discussions happened with design standards and how it's going to look, and we're fine tuning that in. One of the biggest things, though, is community input, and we are actually having a pop-up event at the Pequot Lakes football game for homecoming, Friday, October 8th, this Friday. So we are going to have Bolton and Mink there and addressing any questions, getting feedback from citizens about how the road should go. We have two different alternative routes that we're considering, so we want as much public input as we can. We've had public open houses on it, and we're just trying to get as many people have eyes on it and give their feedback as possible. So that will be happening on Friday evening at the Pequot Lakes homecoming.
Excellent. Very good. That's great to hear. I think the more input we can get, the better. So, all right. All right, moving on. 5B2, Planning Commission. Councilmember Lillehei.
Planning Commission had a relatively short meeting. They only had one item to discuss on planning and zoning. It had to do with a lot split on Lakeshore Drive, 29812 Lakeshore Drive. The applicant wants to, sounds like it's kind of a complicated thing, but he's taking the existing house, moving it to one half of the lot, and then building a new house on the other half of the lot. Essentially, what it's doing is creating two houses that used to be on one lot. So all in all, it was very well received by Planning Commission, and it passed, and they were done in less than a half an hour. So that was it.
Excellent. Thank you. Item 5B3, Technology Committee. Either Councilmember Maroney or Councilmember Lillehei.
I can take that if, and Tom can fill in of anything that I missed. The Technology Committee met on Tuesday, September 21st. Again, the Technology Committee was formed to discuss anything technology-wise, capital improvements for all of our technology needs, security, and some things that are coming in the forefront is phishing security awareness. These are emails that may look legit, may want you to click on a link, click on a download. These are things that we're going to start training staff on, just to be wary of what's going on with that. So we're making some progress, and this is with our IT CW Technology. So they're actively participating in it and helping us out with that, and more to come.
On systems?
On Systems, I'm sorry. On Systems with John.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Maroney, for that report. Moving on, 5B4, Community Center Task Force. Councilmember Wall.
So the latest update for the community center is that we had a focus segment on WJJY on September 30th, where they presented and discussed some of the planning efforts that are going on with the Community Center Task Force, along with discussing the community center, just to get that promotion out there. We're also working on an article to publish in the Echo to just get the word out again about the survey Right now, there are about 475 survey results so far. So if you haven't had a chance to get out there and take that survey, please do so. And of course, I'm sure you've all noticed the signs around town to kind of promote that as well. So,
Excellent.
thank you.
All right. Thank you for the report on that. Yeah, and I would highly encourage everyone, if you haven't taken the survey, please do so. The more input we can get from the community, the better. That's what we're looking for, so I encourage you to do that. All right, moving on. Item 6, Administrator and Staff Report. 6A, discussion of short-term rental ordinance. City Administrator, do you have a report to provide to us, or a little update, or?
Included in your packet is what, the information that was discussed at the last meeting. Staff was asked to summarize and provide council a written update. Councilmember Lilly, who's been integral in this process, has assisted in this process, and could assist with any other questions if you may have. So the council, in summary, held 3 public hearings over this summer. They took written and verbal comments. Those are included in your packet. The short-term rental ordinance, as proposed, which was reviewed by the city attorney, which was drafted by the short-term rental task force, which was made up of a variety of council members, planning commission members, and city staff, drafted this based upon, it is not the county's ordinance, it is based upon the city's own interpretation of the ordinance, with the underlying desire to be more enforcement than what the county had intended. Now, since we've gone through the process, we've identified some areas that are questionable and we still need to address, but what's included in your packet, what was discussed and shared with residents. I'm moving on to the public comments. Did you want me to go through each of them? I mean, you've had a chance to read them ahead of time.
Yes. No.
And we're sorry about the setup on it, but it takes 2 pages for each, so there's technically 3 pages full of different comments on that. Also, there was some discussion about the fact that the county's ordinance was silent on well systems. They did talk about septic systems and hooking up to regular city sewer. So Mr. Lilly took it upon himself to draft what would look like with adding a well ordinance to make sure that the water system would be adequate as proposed. And then we've had this for a while, but it's a comparison of the 2 different ordinances, the city's ordinance, the county's ordinance, and what we currently have in place. The most significant thing that continues to happen is people misunderstand. The proposed ordinance is a license. It is not a zoning issue. So currently, the city has in place zoning requirements for vacation rentals in 3 different zoning districts, and what is called the no more than 4 times per year rental in each zoning district. With that being said, the new ordinance is an ordinance that is based upon a license. It's just separate from a zoning district. So all the references to, well, which zoning district is this allowed in is not applicable. This is a license through the entire community. Maybe with that said, I'll stop and let the council have their comments and ask me more questions or each other questions.
Yeah, so council, we're in discussion now with this short-term rental ordinance, the draft that's in front of us. We've had 3 public meetings as our city administrator gave us review and overview. Hopefully all of you took the time to read through the comments, look over comparisons, different things. I thank Councilmember Lilly for adding the piece in on the well systems, so that's in there as well. So I guess with that, just start off, do any of the council members have specific questions for our city administrator at this point? Of any of the information he provided or specific comments? Councilmember Maroney, I'll just start with you. Do you have any comments? You've got a lot? Okay. Okay, so start out. Okay. That's what this is about, so that's right.
I want to address the administrator's point real quick, just for clarification, because that's a question, is we talk about the ordinance, rezoning, and this is the license. Can this license be restricted to specific zones? twice a permitted license?
I'd have to check on that, but I would say the answer is, as an ordinance, it's not restricted to a zoning district.
So I'll repeat that again because I was on mute and I got yelled at. My question was, in regards to the license, zoning is an ordinance and this license is no longer part of the zoning. Can we have the license specify which zone this license can be abided by?
And then it becomes a zoning ordinance, and so that's a different process. So I'd have to check
Okay,
into that.
so that's a question. You want me to just keep going?
Just keep
And-
going.
And I'd love for a discussion
Yeah.
as each one goes. 'cause
I'm sure there will.
This is what's going through my head as I
Sure.
read it.
Yep.
4 people per bedroom, which is a minimum of 70 square feet, which in my eyes is a 10-foot by 7-foot bedroom. 4 people can be in that bedroom. That's an awfully small bedroom. 2 sets of bunk beds could technically work. It's going to be close quarters. But can we base it on a size of room? Can we say, from 70 feet to 120 feet can be 2 people, and 120 to 150 is 3 people, et cetera. And then what defines a bedroom? There's a section on 2HI, and it's a bedroom means an area that is either a room designed or used for sleeping. Well, you can sleep in the kitchen if you really wanted to. And a room or area of dwelling that has minimum floor area of 70 square feet with access gained from the living area or living area hallway, and architectural features that affect the use of a bedroom under this item may be considered in making the bedroom determination. Does it need a closet? It's very vague on what a bedroom is, and I'd love to be able to define that a little bit more. And again, if we want to go down that path of X size can have only so many participants in there, and as it gets bigger. And I don't know if chime in, or otherwise I'll keep going. And if anybody wants, I do have printouts of all my, do you just pass
Just
them
hand
down?
them out, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that.
The question is, should we allow anywhere within the city of Breezy Point? When I built or bought in the city of Breezy Point, I did not expect to live in a rental community. So I am concerned about what my next door neighbors are going to be personally, and I'm sure anybody else might be concerned of what's going to be next door. And this goes back to the zoning portion. Do we limit what zones? Do we limit it of how many within a certain amount of area? Again, it gets back to, you could be one person that lives full-time in your community, in your street, and you could have 7 other homes that are all short-term rentals. 3M2, I referenced it all, but I didn't copy it all down because I said I'm going to have it all in front of me, which this might be on the previous one without the addition of the well, because I was referencing without the well. So it's actually 3N2. States that the property contact information should be available on the Breezy Point website. Crow Wing County is also supposed to have the contact information, so our fees that we're going to charge for licenses keep this up to date and maintained. Just because a license comes in with John managing it, and in 3 months John's fired and let go because now Susie's going to manage it, what's that fee look like through our third party of updating that information? And does it get to the county? Who maintains that database? What else? On the website, city's website, I would love to see the summary of complaints and the outcomes or resolutions on a per property basis. If I want to open a complaint about a specific property, I can go to that website, see the property details of who owns it and who to contact, but I also want to see what have been the previous complaints about it. Summary, doesn't need to be a full book, in my opinion, but that can be on. I'm only halfway through, so I apologize if you're wanting to be short and sweet tonight.
Nope.
We need to define what a timeshare, hotel, motel, bed and breakfast, resort is, section 2B, and what an apartment is. If I am a owner and I buy 5 homes, can I call myself a resort? Timeshare, I believe, is a deeded property, so that's a little bit different, but it should be at least clarified in definitions. Can I call myself a bed and breakfast? What constitutes a bed and breakfast? Can I put a bowl of cereal out and say, now I served you and I gave you a bed, I'm good to go? That kind of went into that. And I believe this has been addressed, or at least discussions, should we have one-time inspections or multiple inspections? But should we inspect the home when it's being licensed, when it's got an application in for a license? Should we be inspecting that property, counting how many bedrooms are in there? It was an interesting note. The county ordinance did define quiet hours from 12 to 7 on weekends for Friday and Saturday night. I know ours is strictly from 10 to 7. It was a point of discussion. I'm either way on it. It's just one of my thoughts I had to jot down. The county has fees for false reporting. I found this interesting. False reporting, which is $100 for the first offense, $300 for the second, and $1,000 for the third. But yet there's no fees on the ordinance of what the offenses are to the renter. I found that kind of interesting. And Breezy Point doesn't have any fees for false reporting. And maybe it's because we're referencing the county ordinance, but if we're stating that Breezy Point's gonna be the first point of contact, and we forward those on to the county, that's great, but the county is gonna implement these fees, and what's the city get? Nothing. So continued discussion, I think, needs to happen on that. How do we define previous allowed use? You know, resort commercial zone properties that are deeded timeshare exempt. You know, if it's a timeshare, it's a different animal in my opinion. Do we have any deeded timeshares that are outside of resort commercial? And this might be, we do have two big players in town that I am well aware of, and maybe it's a sit down with them to gather all their information, make sure that their timeshares are all appropriately distinguished as resort commercial, and maybe some need to be changed on that zoning. Almost done, folks. Compliance, again, goes back to inspecting each short-term rental. Do we contract out with our building inspector? They get some, you know, that's to be discussed, but inspections. And then we need some teeth and penalties defined. Besides just revoking a license after 4 occurrences within 18 months, there should be a financial penalty that grows with each substantiated claim. Substantiated, mind you. And it should either be payable over the counter, or it should be assessed to the taxes with an extra increase based on that fee. If a property owner did come to town, buy up 6 properties, don't even live here, and they're just renting places, and we say it's gonna be a $100 fine every time we come out there, they're gonna say, I'm charging $600 a night. That's nothing. Take the money. So, you know, just an idea was, let's charge them 5 times what their average nightly advertised price was. You're gonna rent it for $150, it's $150 times 5. You're gonna rent it for $600, we're gonna charge you times 5. And this is, again, just to get teeth into it. What happens if a property is found on a short-term rental website? I won't even list them because Airbnb and VRBO are just 2. There's multiples out there. What if they're listed without a Breezy Point license? I'd say we'd want to give them at least 1 warning. Let's be fair. Maybe they weren't aware of it. Give them a 30-day, you know, compliance issuance. But if there's no license taken and the county still doesn't, if they don't have a license, there's a bigger issue. But if the county has a license, at least we know who to contact. We can contact the owner. And then those addresses should also be placed on the website indicating there's a complaint driven. They might not have them licensed yet, but they should be at least notified that that property has been contacted, that no license has been done. And again, after said properties receiving warnings, there should be penalties in place to assess the property. These are just my thoughts, and I'm sure more will come as more discussions come, but you all have it in front of you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Maroney. Feedback from other council members. Councilmember Lillohei?
You want to be
You want to go last? Okay, Councilmember Bakken, yep.
I want to commend Mr. Maroney. You stole a lot of my thunder, my friend. But you have keyed in on exactly what needs to be done at the city level and planning and zoning level. Excellent job. You shot a lot of holes in the stuff I had. You hit it right on the target. I have a couple of things I would like to add. Well, first of all, I would ask the mayor and city administrator to research and furnish the council with the legal opinion from our attorney on grandfather. It's grandfathered. It's been a constant problem since I sat in one of these chairs for the last 25 years. And it has reared its ugly head again this summer. Number two, I was sent, I believe it was Crow Wing County's number of rentals, and compared it to what we have listed. And it was grossly in error compared to what our city listed. Our city listed a far smaller number. 2 times I addressed at the Planning Commission, the planner, on my simple question: does the city know how many rentals are in the city of Breezy Point? And the answer was no. I also don't know. But one would think our administration would have that figure. So I would like to see that researched, compared, and find out what the true number is. Lastly, we have a problem in this city, just I'm speaking only for myself, with city staff taking notes. I'm not talking about meticulous notes or copious notes. What I'm referring to is a brief notation, if you will, on the discussion with an applicant. We have a problem currently on Fawn Lake. The permit was issued over the counter.
Councilmember Bakken, I'm gonna stop you right
No,
there,
you won't. The
because
permit
that's
was
not,
issued over the counter.
this has nothing to do with our
and
short-term
no, it's
rental.
got everything to do, Mr. Mayor.
No, it does not. This is not about our short-term rental ordinance, and I
It has
told you before.
nothing to do with it. It's talked about notes, and the staff has been directed not, I repeat, not to take notes by the administrator.
This
That, in
still,
my, lays this city wide open for a lawsuit. End of story.
and again, that was not to be addressed here. This is to do with the short-term
It's
ordinance.
requested, and I want it noted in the minutes. End of story. You may proceed.
Councilmember Ball, would you have some comments you'd like to add about the short-term rental ordinance,
Sure.
which is what we're discussing right now?
So, Councilmember Maroney, you had quite a number of comments. I think they're great that you went through that. I was part of the task force that, along with Councilman Lilihide, that helped put together the draft ordinance. And we spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth about what makes sense for the city to take on from a responsibility perspective, based on the fact that the county has their own kind of rules that everyone has to follow. There's certainly some things I agree we could look at based on some of the feedback we got from the community members, such as like limiting the number of times, you know, potentially during the summer, or with respect to like number of individuals in a certain size bedroom? Does it make sense to limit that when it's not children or certain individuals above a certain age? Those are all good questions. I haven't looked at enough ordinances, and personally that's what I would do, is I would kind of spend some time, if we were going to focus in on those issues, go back to some other ordinances to see kind of how other cities have dealt with those particular problems. I personally do think that the teeth that we have in there now is sufficient. I don't think that most VRBO rental individuals are out there to, you know, cause a lot of issues. And so I know there are some, and I am definitely privy to that, and I appreciate that, and I think that this license process will help deal with that. The other ones, as far as quiet hours, we can look at that again. I know it was something we talked about when we had the task force and we did the drafting, and we wanted to stick to the hours that we had. But that's certainly up for discussion. I know we talked about the resorts and things like that as well. And I guess I am, outside of like the number of times a year, especially during the summer, or the number of individuals in a bedroom, I'm actually fine with how the ordinance is drafted right now. And I think it would be good to have something better in place other than just the ordinance to kind of police this. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Councilmember Lillahei.
These are all very good comments, and I appreciate the time and effort that you went into, Mike, on getting this done. Specifically, you know, I can answer the question about the definition of a bedroom. That's basically out of state statute. This is almost verbatim to what the statute defines as a bedroom. The thing that makes this difficult in that the VRBOs consider rooms that are not bedrooms as sleeping quarters. And that is one thing that we would not be allowing. We would have to have a plan, basically a sketch of what the layout is, and that is how we would determine the number of bedrooms. And as you say, a 70 square foot room cannot handle 4 people. You know, it's going to be crazy. The person won't be renting their place very long if they say that that's a bedroom and they cram 4 people in there. So there's one thing as far as the limitation on paper, but then there's another thing as far as the limitation on practicality. One of the things that is really hot has to do with, you know, we've mentioned it, grandfathering. The county does not recognize grandfathering, and my intention is to not recognize grandfathering under our ordinance, because there are VRBOs that are being operated by the resort and management company that are outside the commercial district, and so therefore they should have to have a license and comply with all of the requirements of having a license. I remember seeing the list of the properties that the resort, or not exactly sure who else was renting properties in the city. It was partially typed, partially handwritten, and it was basically just on almost like a piece of scrap paper. And that was our list. That has long disappeared over the years, and to the best of my knowledge, it doesn't exist anymore. The fact that it is authorizing rentals outside the RC district not to be under compliance, which, you know, my opinion is that that should not be. So grandfathering essentially under this ordinance would be out. Or some of the other things. I would like to get the task force back together to start going over all of the comments, and this is a great start. You know, we have some comments. I would say mildly disappointed that we didn't get more comments. Out of 3 public hearings, we only had a few. We had some written ones, we had some verbal ones, but they all need to be addressed. And I would like to get the task force back together. And I would actually like to propose that we actually put together a workshop once the task force has a chance to look at all of the comments and be able to put together, let's say, another draft of the ordinance. I think the ordinance is going to be good because it does add in a lot of things that the county does not consider. One of the biggest ones obviously has to do with noise complaints. Who to call, that's the biggest thing. They say, you know, go to the county website and make your complaint. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning and the place next door is making a lot of noise, you're not going to know where to go for the to make a noise complaint. We are proposing that we would have essentially a laminated sheet that is given to all of the adjacent neighbors that would have the points of contact listed basically in order. Here's the first one that you call. Here's the second one you call. You know, and we do actually have teeth in you will be the owner of the VRBO or his representative has to be able to respond within an hour. And they miss that. I mean, they're looking at possible suspension of their license, and then they could not rent that place until it gets resolved. But yes, there's a lot of questions that we need, and I think the biggest one is going to be on the definition of bedrooms and grandfathering. So if anybody has any questions specifically of me as far as, you know.
Councilman Rowe?
Yes, I know.
Your last statement there is that we have teeth, you know, that if they don't comply and don't answer within an hour, they might lose their license. The way I read it is they have to have 4 problems within 18 months. I didn't see anything that says if you don't respond, you lose your license like that.
Oh, well, okay.
So
I misspoke, yes.
Yep, but getting that additional teeth in that licensing to say, here's what your penalty fee schedule is, would be beneficial in that.
And that's,
I get yelled at again. Sorry, Deb. And then, the other point that I was gonna bring up is, it's interesting, I started off the question asking about zoning, specific zones, and you made the comment saying if it's in a resort commercial zone, they're exempt. So it's kind of contradicting itself, is it not?
the resort, anything in the resort commercial zone would be part of the resort. That's the only place we have,
Is it?
I believe so.
I believe that we have some properties zoned resort commercial that are not rentals.
I think what Tom's saying is that under 2B, short-term unit, what's excluded is the short bed and breakfast, resorts, timeshares, hotel, motel, and I think he already said we needed to have better definitions for each of those. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's what
Okay.
you're asking too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're taking the resort commercial zone portion out, but we're saying that if it's a current bed and breakfast resort, okay.
Now, bed and breakfast, resort, timeshare, hotel, motel, those are actually covered under state statutes.
Okay,
Okay. The problem here is the VRBOs are not covered under state statutes. The state doesn't want anything to do with it. However, if you actually go into some of the fine print in the ordinance, it requires that the VRBO essentially be in compliance with all the state statutes. It's one of these things, it's specifically called out in two, where was it? Well, first off, it's called out in the county ordinance that says they have to be compliant with specific Minnesota state statutes, which are all of the requirements for commercial operations.
Okay.
It's a subtle one, and I don't think too many people realize that, especially the VRBO owners.
Understood.
Yep.
And I'll just go on point of record too. I would assume, and I guess I've never really looked, but I'm not gonna ask audience but I'm gonna assume there's timeshare rentals that if somebody owns a week,
Yeah.
deeded property, and they put it up for short-term rental because they can't use it that week, that does not need a license because it's part of a timeshare deeded?
That's correct. My initial thought was that they should have a license if they're going to be doing that, but further discussions that I've had with others indicate that that may not actually be a practical thing to do.
I think it'd be very difficult to
Very-
monitor
very
and track.
Yeah, I think we
I
have.
mean, it could be a one-time thing.
Right, they're gonna
I've got
put it out there for next year.
timeshare, I've got 1 week,
1
I
week.
can't do it, but I want to give it out, so I think in practicality is where that would fall into. I think that would be
And
very
and that was the
difficult.
argument essentially that I had to kind of agree with, you know,
Okay.
doesn't make any sense. Now, don't turn off your microphone.
Nope, I'm not doing it anymore. I don't wanna get yelled at.
I think the mayor's point is a good one, though. You have to read the county ordinance along with all the state statutes, along with the city ordinance in order to really capture.
I'll be 100% honest, I didn't go, when the county ordinance referred to pursuant to Minnesota statutes and started listing a bunch of numbers, I did not.
I did.
not.
I looked all of those up, and essentially that is all of the same requirements that the resort has to comply with, you know, a regular commercial operation. And I don't know if the county knew that they were actually incorporating that by reference, but it is incorporated, and
And we
technically they
incorporate
have to comply with all of those statutes.
theirs. Okay.
Other comments? Anything at this point? All right, well, I'll go ahead and make a few comments now. I think all the points are very valid on both sides. And I see the challenges on both sides as well. I want the council to think about a bigger picture here too. While we're looking at a short-term rental ordinance, and it's a draft, and we're looking at changing it, potentially having our own, or who knows, the action may not end up there. We don't know, but there's some things to keep in mind. One is cost, okay? If we're gonna go down the road of having an ordinance, and we wanna put teeth in it, and we wanna enforce it, we're gonna need somebody to do it. Our current police force is not gonna have the ability to be running around on a call all the time when something gets called in on a short-term issue, okay? That could be a challenge. So how do we then do that so that we have a person? I heard comments about having stuff put on the website and having that monitored and things put out. And so who is it that's going to do all that? Who's that person gonna be? When we look at our staff right now, they have enough on their plates. So then when we start looking down that road, does that mean we're gonna have to start looking at adding more personnel and staff? Well, that's a cost. Where's that money gonna come from? Is it gonna be the fees that we take in from that? Is that gonna be enough to cover it? Are we gonna have to set those fees high enough so that we can cover that? So I think those are questions that we have to answer in regard to this as well. How do we do that? How do we look at paying for this? And I'll say that VRBO, short-term rentals, wherever you want to call them, they're not going to go away. We know that. Our city, because of its history and where it lies and where it's at, people are going to look at us as a place where they can have these. And so we have to think about that. I had a couple other notes here. I talked about the staffing. How do we handle that? Just a point of reference, the county does have a hotline right now that a person can call. And I think also we have to caution ourselves when we want to put teeth in an ordinance, what is reasonable? I think it's good to have teeth, but what is that level? Where does that come from? What level are we going to put that at? And then how are we going to enforce it? So that gets into another situation with staff. If we're gonna have the homes inspected before they can get a license, are we gonna put that in charge of the staff that we have currently right now doing all of our stuff with our housing? Are we gonna have a separate person that does that goes out and inspects these facilities? Make sure that the well's in compliance, make sure that the bedrooms meet the state statutes, make sure all those. A lot of unanswered questions of how would we do that if we're gonna do it? And that takes people. So again, that's a cost to us, the city, and how do we pay for all that? And I think for me, that's the bigger question. We can put together any ordinance we want and say, hey, this is what we're gonna do. We have one currently right now, and what have we heard? It's not enforced, it's not taken care of, it's not being, well, okay, who does that? Who's the person that's gonna take the time to do that? So I think those are questions that have to be answered in addition to what the ordinance itself looks like at the end of the day. And is the ordinance a Breezy Point ordinance? Is that truly out the end of this? Do we want one ourselves? Do we want to look at saying, okay, do we go with Crow Wing County's ordinance? And then in addition, we have somebody on the ground here that then oversees some stuff? I don't know. Something to investigate, something to think about. There might be two ways to do this. Because I think when you start looking at the ordinance we currently have, and I look at what Crow Wing County has in place and what our proposed one, there's like 3 areas where it's different. Otherwise, it mimics Crow Wing County's ordinance to the T. There's only 3 areas it differs in. So then when we start looking down that road, do we really want to have our own ordinance? Do we want to follow the counties and then take a look at maybe having somebody on the ground here that's the enforcement person for us within the city to make sure that ordinance is being followed? That's another way to look at it. So just some things to think about. Keep in mind too, if we send this back to the task force and they redraft it, we have to put it through the public process again, which I'm fine with. I just want the council to be aware that that's the process we'll have to go down. It'll have to go through the public hearing process, because if you're gonna go back and change that draft of ordinance quite a bit, which it sounds like there could be some major changes in it, the citizens of the city have a right to be able to comment on it publicly again. So we would have to follow that process. So just realize when you start looking at that, okay, our timeline keeps getting longer too. Meanwhile, we have an ordinance in place that technically is in conflict with the county's ordinance right now. So another thing for the council to think about and consider is this a proposal? It's an idea. Do we take on the county's ordinance right now? Do we say that we want to follow the county's ordinance for the time being, realizing we don't have to stay with the county's ordinance at a later date? We can always go back to having our own ordinance if we want. But does that give us the ability and time to be able to get something in place, put together, well thought out, financially, fiscally responsible, and then have the teeth and all the different pieces and parts that I've heard mentioned here tonight in it, and then come back, do a public hearing process, do a final ordinance, and maybe then take on our own ordinance again? It's something for the council to consider that way as well. So I think when you look at the big picture, there's a lot of pieces here to consider. I think all good comments on every end of it. I think task force has done a good job putting something together, but I think we've got a lot more work to do. And do we want to continue to stretch this timeline out, sitting here with an ordinance that is in conflict? And I think that's what the council really has to look at right now at this moment, is do we want to continue to do that? Because we know it's in conflict. So those are my thoughts and my comments. I don't know if anybody has any from the council points back off of that. And ultimately, we have to think about a direction we want to go. We can do something right now. We can put it back on the agenda for November and make a decision at that time of what we want to do after everybody's had time to absorb and think about different things that was been voiced here tonight. So I guess I'm leaving it open to the council. Yep. Councilman Lillian.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And essentially, that's what we're doing right now, because our existing ordinance,
yeah,
it's basically I don't want to say it's a joke, but it just is not being complied with, okay?
Right.
So essentially, we are working under the county ordinance. I just recently made contact with the county to get a list of properties that they have licensed. And I want to bounce that against what is actually showing up on VRBO. Just a brief look right now is there's more properties on VRBO than are on the county license list. I would have had that done by tonight, but the resort I'm staying in doesn't have Wi-Fi, and
That's okay.
I maxed out my data on my phone trying to
Mr.
work on
Littleheim,
that.
maybe you know this answer, maybe you don't. What is the county's stance on if somebody is doing short-term rental without a license?
They're told to cease and desist,
By whom?
Land Services. Yeah.
Okay. So if you
And
compile
Gary,
that list.
if Gary Griffin was very interested, if I had a difference from what I saw on the VRBO and Airbnb websites and bouncing against his. The problem is that his list is by, it's like a internal ID number, it's not the property ID number. So it is a painstaking look through the VRBO list to try and actually identify the property, get an address, and be able to relate that back to, do they actually have a license or not? It's going to take a lot of research. And like I say, I didn't have the data capacity to do that with just my cell phone. But, so I'm working on it. But the other thing is, I think it would be good to have, get the task force back together and then get some stuff done and then actually have a workshop where we can get everybody together. We're obviously not going to get this done by the first of the year. That's a pipe dream.
Which then begs my question, here we are, sitting here right now with an ordinance that currently, and you stated, well, we're following Crow Wing County's ordinance, but we haven't officially adopted that. We still exist under our current ordinance.
We still exist.
So
under our-
that's
that is
the
correct.
point that I'm getting to the council. If we're going to keep going down this road, and you made the comment, we're not gonna have it done by the first of the year, how long does this council wanna keep going down the road with having our ordinance in effect, in conflict with an ordinance that we know that's out there right now? And you're right, that's why this kinda all started too. They put this ordinance in effect. We realized immediately, not only maybe that it was not being used or enforced the way it should be, but ultimately that it was in conflict because of the things they put in place. So again, I think that's the question I keep bringing back to the council is, I think all your points are valid, Councilmember Littlehill. I think, yes, the process needs to continue. I think, yes, we probably need to have the task force reconvene and continue to work on that, but that's not gonna happen overnight. It's gonna take time.
Absolutely.
So what does the council wanna do meanwhile? And I think that's the question we have to think about. And again, we don't ultimately have to make that decision tonight, but I think we do need to make a decision about it soon. At least temporarily, to get us to the point where we're ready then to do whatever it is that we make our final decision to do.
Yeah.
But I think it's in our best interest and it's in the best interest of the citizens to make a decision in that regard. So that's kind of where I'm at too, and I'm speaking to the whole council as well. So I think it's something we don't have to decide tonight, but I think we ultimately need to make a decision about very soon.
Right, and I think we could make a game plan. Obviously, if we do formally adopt the Crow Wing County ordinance, we would have to have public hearing again, and we could basically propose it, have the public hearing, and and then essentially get the same, I would surmise we'd probably get the same comments on the Crow Wing County ordinance that we had here.
Right.
And,
Understand it's a process.
and then we could essentially implement it by the first of the year.
Yeah,
I gotta ask a really dumb question here.
there's no such thing.
Oh, this might be a dumb one.
Never.
This Crow Wing County short-term rental licensing ordinance, are you saying we need to adopt it we need to adopt it?
What I'm saying is I'm proposing that the council consider it for a temporary solution.
Yep, let's pause right there. So, we haven't adopted this.
No.
How does the county have license issuances if we have not adopted this?
Because the people within Crow Wing County still have to go to them to get a license.
Right, so this is legitimately in effect for Breezy Point right now.
It is, but it's not one that the city of Breezy Point has adopted themselves. We exist under our
Understood.
old current ordinance, which
with
is
our
in
current
conflict with
zoning
that ordinance
ordinance.
right now.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so,
I just wanted to clarify that.
yeah, no, absolutely. They're getting licenses because they reside in Crow Wing County. So by Crow Wing County ordinance, they do have to get a license.
Okay.
What my statement was is I think it's important for the council to think about something to get us through until we're ready, because clearly, based on the discussion tonight, we're not anywhere close to having something that we could adopt as our own ordinance. And it's gonna take some more time. Meanwhile, our current ordinance stays continually in conflict with the ordinance Crow Wing County has in place. And to me, I see that as an issue.
Right.
So that's why I propose that we could at least temporarily adopt that, because the city has the ability to go back and have their own ordinance at any time. We've done that in the past with other things, where we've had an ordinance, we haven't had an ordinance, we've had an ordinance, so we could do that. It's providing us some time is what I'm talking about, while not being in conflict, which we have been since that went into effect in January.
Can I ask a question too? I mean, we technically could adopt this draft ordinance as well, right?
We could.
And make modifications to that on a go-forward basis.
You could do that too. You could adopt that current one right now as it's written and then continue to adopt it. But again, it's changed. Every time you change that ordinance, you do go
Right,
through that
I
process.
understand.
So we're trying to limit as much of that as we can help it, I think would be beneficial not only to the citizens, but also to us too.
Either way, we would be going through public hearings.
Yes.
again. Yes.
Yes, either way we would. So the only thing I'm thinking about is we're now going on a year. Close. January will be a year since the new ordinances was adopted with Crow Wing County. And Breezy is still sitting here with our current ordinance, which my issue is there's a conflict between the two of them. And that's the point I'm trying to bring out. Plus, about all the other points, I think we ultimately have to think of the cost too. And we need to be very thoughtful about that process, because if we want to adopt it, no matter what we adopt, whether we adopt the ordinance that's drafted, whether we adopt Crow Wing County's ordinance, we have to think about then how, if we want to enforce it, what's that going to look like and how are we going to pay for it?
Right, and I know we talked about that when we did the draft. And
Yeah.
that's why we didn't add probably a lot of the other items that have come up for discussion, because there is just no one to do it. And it's a tough discussion, but from an
Yeah.
enforcement standpoint, it's very tough, and you can see that on the county level too.
Absolutely. Well, no, I don't disagree with that statement at all.
One final comment, Mr. Mayor, if I may, and then you can move on to whatever.
Sure.
You can't make a motion. It's
Well, well,
growth comes to mind. Mm-hmm. And I was reading in the news, Breezy Point News, the new housing starts, I think it was 46, am I right, Patrick?
46 new houses is your question? Yes.
Yeah. 46, so that trajectory has done nothing ever since I've sat in this chair, but go this way. My point is simply this: sooner or later, whoever sits in these chairs is gonna have to come to grips, and that affects the people here.
Yeah, it does.
Your taxes are gonna have to be raised. For another police officer, I think it's needed right now, just a comment off the top of my head, but we really need to factor this into that plan.
I agree.
And you mentioned it in your overview. We gotta, like we budgeted for sewers and Tom was involved in all that, yes.
yeah.
Yes, we can't forget that.
Well, no, if we're going to enforce it and we're going to truly have some teeth, as Councilmember Maroney speaks of in this, then yeah, we're going to have to, and it's going to require somebody to do it.
Yes, sir.
Because our current staff levels aren't able to do that.
Not volunteering.
So that's a part of the larger discussion we have to have going forward. And I think, and I don't want to speak for the whole council, but what I'm hearing is that we probably need to continue to work on this, that we can't make a decision right now. I would say yes, that I'm in agreement that if, Councilmember Lillahei, if you want to bring your task force back together, start taking a look at this and getting some more information around that. I think what I would encourage the task force to do, though, is also look at that bigger picture we've been talking about. What does that look like? Okay, if we're gonna put more teeth in the ordinance, then how are we gonna handle that so that there can be some discussion in a workshop type setting that we can discuss and kind of make some decisions? However, I'm gonna end it with this. The council does need to seriously consider what we do from now until then with regards to our two ordinances. Because we are in conflict, and we're gonna have to make a decision about what we do there. Because I just don't think it's right for us to continue to sit here being in conflict with an ordinance while we have one in place, and that we're not gonna have one changed in the near future. So think about that, and we can look at potentially putting that back on the agenda in November.
Point of clarification, though, we're not technically in conflict. We have an ordinance. Now, if the county created an ordinance, ours
Right.
is more restrictive, and we can be more restrictive than the county.
Right.
So our ordinance is technically not out of compliance. There's an interim use process for vacation rentals more
Yeah.
than 4 times a year.
Yep.
That still abides today.
Yeah, it
We've
is.
shed a blind eye to it due to us working on this and trying to come up with a better resolution, I agree.
Okay.
But
Well, and again, I think we can talk about that, that's fine. I just think it's important for us to look at this in a timeline fashion of how we want to get it accomplished. And I think it is going to take some time. I don't disagree with what you're saying. You're right, we currently have an ordinance, it is more restrictive. And again, my point is we can stick with that one if we want, or we can think about going with Crow Wings for a temporary time basis. Realize, I'm not stating that we should go with that and stay with it. What I'm stating is it may give us some ability then to work on things from our perspective too. So anyway, I think we're all on the same page that we need a lot more work on this, and that's gonna take some more time. Yes,
Before you come to any conclusions, with our new digital equipment, it's good that we take a 2-minute break to shut the to allow the recording to work itself through the details. About every hour, we need to take a break, so we could just take a 2-minute break.
Yep.
Collect your thoughts, not have any comments, allow Deb to stop the recording, everybody stay where they're at.
Yep.
Just wait 2 minutes, think about what you talked about, no comments, and then we turn the recording back on.
fine,
It's called initializing, I'm sorry, I lost the word there for a second.
fine. So just a quick 2-minute break.
Yep.